Hello, people of the internet. So, as you can probably tell from the title of the video, which, I'm gonna be talking about Papa Kahn from Fallout New Vegas, in case you don't know who that is. So, where should I start? Maybe I should explain the history of the Kahns first, so that way there's context. So in Fallout 1, the first Fallout game, obviously, well, not chronologically speaking. Chronologically speaking, the first is Fallout 76. But Fallout 1, in Fallout 1, there's a vault called Vault 15, where the main experiment of that vault was that every person in the vault would be from drastically different groups. You know, they would all have different viewpoints, grow up in different groups, different tribes, different nations, different cities, in different religions, and so on. And as you can expect, because humans, we love looking for our differences and hating the differences as opposed to looking for similarities, and, you know, that didn't quite work out, and it divided into 4 groups, 3 of which left the vault and became raiders. There's the Jackals, which were basically erased from existence by the Brotherhood of Steel because they were stupid enough to challenge them. They thought they were this big, tough raider tribe that could not be taken down. They attacked the Brotherhood and ended up killing their High Elder, which pissed off the Brotherhood, so the Brotherhood just basically erased them. The Vipers still exist, though, you know, with some Vipers being in Fallout New Vegas. There's the Jackals, which I know nothing about, so I can't even explain anything about them. And there's the one of importance when it comes to this video, the Kahns, and another one of importance, which was still in the vault. The Kahns, obviously, are, well, I don't know where they got the name, but it's not really the point. In the vault, the remainder of the people in the vault ended up becoming the group that would form Shady Sands. The town, or city, whatever you'd like to call it. I would say town, given its size. And they, and eventually, what happened, there was a conflict where the Kahns kidnapped the daughter of the, I don't know, would it be mayor or chief? The town leader, given that I don't know if there's like an official term for what Aradesh is, who's the leader of the town. They kidnapped his daughter, Tandy. And obviously that pissed everyone off a lot because it puts Tandy in a huge amount of danger. It's horrible. So the Vault Dweller is sent by Aradesh to save Tandy. In the process of saving Tandy, he ends up wiping out the Kahns, or at least the camp that Tandy is being held at. And the remnants eventually reform into the new Kahns, which are which are wiped out by the Chosen One. I would give more context than that, but I have no idea about Fallout 2. I haven't played Fallout 2 yet, and I haven't seen Oxhorn's series on Fallout 2 either. And although the only Fallout game I've personally played, I've played New Vegas and 4. I got pretty far in New Vegas, but my computer broke before I could finish it. And I actually, because I'm so intrigued by the Fallout lore, and I feel bad not having played very many of the games, I plan on playing through the whole series from beginning to end, chronologically. So, you know, not in the order they released. So it'd be Fallout 1, then Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel, then 2, 3, blah, 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 blah. yeah, so that way I can know stuff firsthand as opposed to just from watching Oxhorn. Um, but yeah. Then, after the Chosen One destroyed the new Khans, they then reformed a third time and became the Great Khans. And this is the version of the tribe that's important for this video. I just wanted to give context to show that they hate the NCR because Shady Sands turned into the NCR. And so the NCR are enemies of the Great Khans. So in New Vegas, they are one of the minor tribes of the Mojave. And what that means is there are 4 major factions, and there are 3 minor factions. The 3 minor factions, the Brotherhood of Steel, the Great Khans, and the Boomers, are basically just there to either A, be destroyed because you're ordered to by the faction, or B, be convinced to work with you. You could technically put the Enclave and Enclave remnants and followers of the Apocalypse into that group as well as minor factions. But I don't know, it really just depends on what exactly you consider. And you're not directly sent to them, with the exception of, I guess, the followers of the Apocalypse, if you're doing a Yes Man playthrough. Although you can convince them to work with the NCR, who don't directly send you to the followers. But yeah, the Great Khans is one of the minor factions. And just for the sake of explaining, I'm going to go ahead and say what each major faction's opinion is of the Khans. Caesar's Legion is working directly with the Khans. And the Khans, because I guess the Khans don't understand the Legion well enough to know that that's a bad idea. Although you can tell them that, and they won't believe you, but you can show them evidence and stuff. Well, 2 of them will believe you with just words alone. But, that's kind of part of what I'm saying about their leadership being a problem. But yeah. So if you let me think. If you convince, you can convince, okay. So the Khans, House doesn't care about the Khans at all. He never sends you to them. What happens to them entirely just doesn't matter to him. To Yes Man, he considers the Khans gross. He wants you to eradicate them. The NCR, they also consider the Khans bad, not just because they're gross, but because of the generational hatred I just explained. So they want you to kill the Khans, although you can convince the Khans to work with the NCR, and that's kind of part of what I'm leading up to. This is just explanation, so there's context. So now it's time to actually talk about convincing the Khans to work with the NCR or having them stay with the Legion. So there's a group of quests that the Khans want you to do, and how you do, or not how you do, what quests you do and and stuff like that can determine, is related to what faction you do. If you're working with the Legion, then one of the things you'd want to do is go to Nelson to speak. You get sent to Nelson by the Khans, and you also get sent to Boulder City to help the Khans at Boulder and to help the Legion at Nelson, to basically just wipe out Camp Forlorn Hope. Of course, wiping them out isn't necessary. There's, I think, 3, maybe 4 people you have to kill. But because sneak killing is just not really worth it, I would just say just wipe them out anyway. Who cares? Plus, if you're doing that, you're probably doing a Legion playthrough anyway, so why would you give a shit about how many NCR members of the NCR live? Like, why would you want them to? But yeah, if you do that, plus all of the other quests that the Khans have for you, you get to become named the heir of Papa Kahn, just for being a random person that showed up and helped them, which is pretty dumb. And that's how you can convince them to work with whatever faction you want them to work with, is by killing Kahn and then taking over, and then making the decision yourself. But if you don't want to do that, there are three, he has, well, actually not three, 4 advisors. And you can convince 3 of the 4 that the Legion is wrong and that they shouldn't work with the Legion, that their goals don't align like they think they do. Regis is the one that you don't convince, and that's because he's already convinced. He wants to work with the NCR. So, so you convince the 2 drug dealer people by telling them that the Legion does not like drugs. They do not allow them. And you convince the New Zealand lady that she wouldn't be able to fight on the front lines. Because she's a woman. Because the Legion are sexist assholes. But then there's Papa Kahn, who you don't even have to convince the advisors if you know how to convince Papa Kahn. Or if you just are gonna kill him and have Regis take over. Because he'll take over after Kahn dies if you kill him without becoming the heir. And so, with Papa Kahn, after you convince them to leave the Legion, he's very stubborn. And, that is a huge problem because they're in the middle of a war. Technically a 4-way war, but from the perspective of the people involved, it's a 2-way war. Because obviously no one knows Yes Man exists, and House is just kind of like there. People think of him as part of the NCR, like, not directly, but partially. So they don't know his plan to do anything. So to them, it's just a war between the Legion and the NCR. And when you're in the center of a war, both sides, if you're with neither side, both sides can walk over you. They can do whatever they want because you're not being protected. But if you choose a side, the side you choose will protect you from the side you didn't choose. Meaning only one of them will try to walk over you, and they may not even succeed, and they probably won't if you pick the right side, at least based off skill. Obviously, morally speaking, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If you're picking the morally right side, that doesn't mean they can protect you well. It just depends on why you're picking, what side you're picking. But yeah, because they can't work with the Legion... Because they cannot work with the Legion, they have only the choice of the NCR or no one. It's a wild berry Red Bull, by the way. Not sponsored, I just like Red Bull. Anyway. NCR... they have to pick a side in order to not be walked all over by, So, and because they can't pick the Legion, and they don't know about the other 2 sides in this conflict, they are just left with the NCR. But Papa Kahn is too strong in his generational hatred for the NCR. He doesn't let the logic behind why he should join the NCR be logic enough. He wants glory for the Khans. He wants them to be big and strong and intimidating. And not only And the thing is, when you know Fallout lore, you know that it is nearly impossible for them to get their glory back, because the glory they had was back when they were back when they were attacking Shady Sands, and then they were wiped out by one dude. And then the fear that happened when they reformed into the new cons was only because the only other cons people knew was the ones they were scared of. And then they were also wiped out by one dude. Meaning now they just have a reputation of they're the barbaric people that get wiped out by one person. That can be erased from history by just one person who decides to do so. And it's meaning they're pretty far from glory. And I'm not saying that wanting glory for your people is wrong, necessarily. It can be, and this is one of the contexts where it is, because it gets in the way of progress. In order to move forward, they have to join the NCR. The issue is, if they do, he considers it surrendering, essentially, meaning they lose their glory, they lose their strength, they lose their ability to strike fear. And that is a huge problem for him, and basically for just him. And I say basically for just him, because when it comes to the other when it comes to the 4 advisors, they all are perfectly fine with joining the NCR. So even if they want glory for the cons, and just have a different interpretation of what glory looks like, they still agree with the idea of joining the NCR. And I think it's because they're in the center of a war and they have to pick a side. And I think that he's a bad leader because he is not letting go. Now, there are a few different options for the tribe. A few different endings, I should say. One of them is to convince them to just leave. Say, hey, you're not really going to find glory here because this is NCR territory. You'd probably want to go somewhere else where, you'd be isolated, or at the very least, unique. People wouldn't know who you were. And that's... my fan fell off of what I set it on. But I'll pick that up as I talk. But yeah, he if you do that, they form a massive drug empire out, in the east, which, obviously, oh my god, I did it again. In the east, because of their, I don't know why. They just do. And as a result, that's what's considered the best ending for the cons. But I don't think that would be the best decision to make as leader. I think the best decision is to stay where you are and to work with what you have. And which would mean one of the other 2 endings, which don't end well for the cons, but they end fine. If you convince them to join the NCR, if Papa Kahn is the Khan in charge, the main guy, I don't know why I'm saying Khan as if that's the name of their leader. That's not. That'd be the Death Hand is the name of the leader of at least the first iteration. But yeah, Papa Kahn being the current Death Hand, if he's in charge, rather than... they will die in the Battle of Hoover Dam. In fact, their fight at Hoover Dam is called Suicidal by Papa Kahn, who is narrating that ending. If, however, Kahn is dead, Regis would be in charge. And they survive the Battle of Hoover Dam, and they not only survive, but they get to live for at least a little bit, because they get sent to a reservation. And eventually, the NCR expands to the point of taking over that reservation, essentially. Meaning it's not really a reservation, you know? But yeah. But I think a good leader would realize they're in the center of a war, and the best decision is to pick a side. And because there's two sides to pick in the eyes of the Khans, because they don't know about House or Yes Man, and the Legion is not the side to pick, they know the only option is the NCR, or they're alone. And so because they're alone, without the NCR, that is, Papa Kahn's refusal to join is pretty stupid and genuinely just bad leadership. Because one thing to keep in mind is his generational hatred has nothing to do with him. Everyone involved in that fight between the Khans and Shady Sands is dead. President Aradesh died. President Tandy died. Garl the Death Hand died. The Death Hand at the time died. Everyone died, and even the next iteration of the Khans is dead too. Meaning there's no one alive to even talk about that story firsthand or even secondhand. Meaning the generational hatred shouldn't mean anything for Papa Kahn because he wasn't in that conflict. He should put that aside and think of the logic of what's going on. Instead, he's too focused on glory and on hating the NCR. Now, I do understand that in the two versions of events where they join the NCR, things don't go well because Papa Kahn, I guess, is just a terrible leader on the battlefield, is probably why they die in that version of events. And the NCR just isn't that great. But even then, which is why things don't end up well even if Regis is in charge. But even then, that doesn't really mean anything. Just because they take over the reservation, why do they need a reservation, If they just adjust to being under the control of the NCR, then they should be fine. And if they can't, then they didn't know that they would need to. Regis is making these deals without realizing that the NCR... They can't tell the future, right? We know the future because we know the endings. So, of course, we know that no matter who's in charge, if they join the NCR, it fails miserably. But the thing is they don't know that. And because it's the smartest option in the moment, joining the NCR is the right decision, even if we know, objectively speaking, according to what we know about the future, it isn't. So, yeah. So, I personally think my ending, and I think it's just because I really love the NCR, but my ending that I consider canon to New Vegas is all of the factions that could work with the NCR did, meaning the Brotherhood were talked into it, the House was forced into it by having a Securitron army destroyed. If you're wondering where that comes from, that's cut content, but I still consider it canon just because I like happy endings. And plus, I think it's in character. The reason it was removed was because it was thought of as out of character. But I think it's in character because he's disarmed. So it makes sense that he would immediately realize that the smartest option is to surrender. Because the only other option is to hold New Vegas until the NCR takes over by force. which just means he dies. But if he surrenders, he gets to live and probably be some form of politician to represent New Vegas. You know? And this includes Regis being in charge of the Khans, and the Khans fighting with the NCR and getting the reservation. My personal belief about the Khans ending in New Vegas, even though you can't actually achieve this in the game, I imagine what would have likely happened after you convince convince 3 of the 4 advisors, as well as Papa Kahn, that the Legion is not the right decision. They would confront Papa Kahn about it themselves. And they would talk to him and realize he's stubborn and obsessed with glory, and so they would turn on him and kill him. Because they're a raider tribe. They're not a group that's going to stand for shit like that. They're going to kill him because he's in their way, and he's actively ruining their tribe's chances of survival. And this is the 3rd iteration of the tribe. So it might not get another iteration. Obviously, canonically speaking, yeah, probably Bethesda would bring them back. But that's not the point. My point is, they don't know that. And also, I don't think that's the case either, because Bethesda doesn't really care about the West Coast. They write the East Coast. Well, sort of. There's one West Coast thing they wrote, which is the show, but I don't consider the show canon. So, because no. But yeah. In summary, Papa Kahn is a terrible leader. Regis would make a better leader, or the courier, but I would say Regis would canonically be the leader. Because you have to pick a side in a war. There's actually an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars that talks about this, with this village of, like, dwarf creatures with an Irish accent. They want peace and neutrality, but obviously the war comes to their planet, and the exact lesson I'm explaining, that you have to pick a side, is shown. Because if you don't pick a side, both sides can walk all over you. So you still have to pick a side so the one that is right can keep the one that is wrong from walking all over you. You know? And that's my main point about Papa Kahn, is he has to pick a side, and his refusal to pick a side makes him a horrible leader. So, yeah. Bye.